seen girls cry, I've seen girls laugh, I've seen girls drink, I've seen girls like do everything.
Since your teenage years, you were already selling your photos.
Yeah. You know, photography is interesting because it's about a relationship, right?
How did you learn that?
From that one class I took. We're not just shooting clothes, at least for me, you know, because it was always about the girls.
Really?
Yeah, people used to photograph the outfits, or when they got photographed on the runway or they got photographed backstage, you could see the detail, and then they would sell those photos.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's crazy shit happened back there. It wasn't just like models, hair, and makeup. It was like, so it was very common practice for someone to be shooting something and not get credit. But everyone knew who was making the photos. Mm-hmm. You know, I was this little kid, so my dad went to work and they just sort of left me backstage. And to stay out of the way, they gave me a camera.
Yeah, but so many times they try to kick you out of the backstage.
Oh yeah,
which is crazy.
Why would that? I never understood why.
Fashion Host Podcast.
Today we're thrilled to welcome a true legend and veteran of backstage photography, known on Instagram by the simple handle Greg Backstage.
Before the rise of social media, photographers like Greg Kessler were our only window into the magic behind runways.
With over 2 decades of experience, Greg was the photographer of the iconic Style.com.
And to this day, he still continues to capture the creativity and energy of behind the scenes.
We're excited to hear about his journey
and evolution of backstage photography.
Welcome, Greg Kessler.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. That's a nice intro. I mean, 2 legends themselves. So it's nice to be here. So thank you for having me.
Maybe we wouldn't
you
be
so much.
so legendary if it wasn't for you and your backstage moments.
That is so true.
Oh, I don't know about that. I think you guys would shine regardless.
Thank you so much. You're very kind, Greg. Greg, let's dive right into it. How did you decide to become a photographer, and when did you realize that you want to do a backstage?
Sure. It's actually quite a funny story. When I was a kid, my father was in the fashion business.
Doing what?
He was an executive at one of the fashion houses, and it was really like the supermodel era. So it was like Cindy Crawford, Linda Evangelista, Naomi, Claudia Schiffer, like Elle Macpherson, Sports Illustrated. There was supermodels were big, and I asked my dad if I could go to a fashion show, and he was like, "Sure, show's on a Friday. You can get out of school and just come in with me."
How old were you?
I was like 13 or 14.
Oh,
The perfect time to see those girls.
Yeah, it was just like everyone was in their prime, I suppose. Maybe I was 14 probably. And yeah, it was a hoot. I had already been in the offices, so I knew everyone. But yeah, it was something else. And, you know, I was this little kid, so my dad went to work and they just sort of left me backstage, and to stay out of the way, they gave me a camera. And they were like, "Here, go follow Roxanne." And it was Roxanne Lowitt, who is the most iconic backstage photographer, really. She created the genre, if you will. So that was it. They're like, "Go, have fun." That was it.
With the camera.
Yeah,
but it was analog camera back then.
Yeah, it was film for sure. So, in fact, I think the first camera I had was my father's, and it was like a Pentax camera. It was like an autofocus Pentax camera and a little zoom lens. So yeah, I just like kind of tucked behind Roxanne. Like she stood one place, I sort of stood across from her and just kind of like did my thing. And she's like, go do your thing. Everyone loves you because you're like this little kid.
Yeah, how those legends reacted to this little kid taking pictures of them?
They loved it. I mean, they're like, what are you doing here? I was like, I don't know. I came to see you.
Who was the star? You were the star.
No, I mean, it was funny because back in those days, there were 3 shows. Each designer, the big designers, had a whole day of shows.
Which year are we talking about?
Oh, I think this is 1989, 1990. So, yeah, so like Donna Karen showed on Friday. Ralph showed on Wednesday or Thursday. I think Oscar showed on Wednesday. And then the little smaller designers would show somewhere in there.
And what do you mean the whole day?
The whole day. Like you got there and the designer had 3 shows. They had so like Ralph, you know how Ralph does? So that's how it used to be. So you would go in the morning at like, I don't know, I guess I was there at like 8 o'clock. And then everyone would show up. Then you do hair and makeup. And that was like the first show, I think, for friends and family. So like all the shit could go wrong. So whatever went wrong, they then fixed. And there was like, all the dresses went back to the shop or to the tailors, and they got stitched and fixed and brought in. And then the next show was the press show. And that was like the big one. And after that was the market show for the retailers. And there was like an hour or 2 in between. So you would like, everyone would hang out, and then they would go like for after the first show. And then after the second show, everyone would go get lunch or go to the bar and then come back for the last show. And then after the last show, everyone just split. So funny. I'm just remembering all of it.
As you telling all of this, I'm picturing the atmosphere, and it must be so magical to be there, isn't it?
It was very insulated. So everyone, very much like when we were sort of in school, if you will. So like we always called it school, right? Each year was a class.
Yeah.
And it was cool. Everyone was pals. Everyone was shooting around. Like the Double Mint twins were like Karen Muldar and Elaine Irwin, and they were like always together. And I guess like Linda and Christy sort of did their thing. I always liked Cindy Crawford. She was the one I would always kind of want to hang out with. And
because of her personality?
Or beauty?
Well, both. I mean, she's so smart, you know?
Yeah,
like,
I know, but later on you
super
figured
smart.
that out. At the beginning it was beauty, right?
I mean, a 13-year-old kid.
Yeah, I know. I can just imagine you there.
And then a couple years later, like Nikki Taylor was there. So that was pretty cool because we were about the same age. And yeah, I mean, it's just funny. You're like...
That day, that was the idea about your perfect career planted in your head that day?
Oh no way. I thought it was fun, but I didn't really want to shoot. I mean, it was fun. There was so much energy. It was so cool. But I was more interested in like the manufacturing side of fashion. Like I always thought it was super cool. Fashion, like the marketing and the manufacturing, like the making of the clothes, I was more interested in. But as I sort of was at more shows and, you know, I would go back to school with the photographs of all these people.
I was about to say, what about schoolmates?
What did you do last week? I was like, I went to this fashion show and hung out with all these people. So they were like, well, if you're photographing all these people, you should shoot for the newspaper or you should shoot for the yearbook. So I did that, and I was making money doing that. So it just kind of, that became the trajectory from there.
Since your teenage years, you were already selling your photos.
Yeah.
So the photography chose you then, we would say.
Kinda, yeah. And it was free film. That was another thing, you know, like, if you want to shoot for the newspaper, you're like, do I get free film? Like, free film and processing, do whatever you want. So it was just like, essentially it was like being a digital photographer, because digital photography, you don't have to pay for anything. Your hands never get wet. Here I had free film and a processor or a darkroom that I could just use. So it was kind of.
So you learned it on the go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
It was only like, I think I was a senior in high school. Someone asked me to teach a photo class. And I was like, geez, I never really learned. So I then took like a class like half a year before, and then the next year I taught it.
So basically you learned, I mean, that's not an easy environment to learn how to take a great photo. I mean, the lighting, the tightness, the chaos of the backstage. And
it was a little different back then. It was still chaotic, but you know when we see small spaces, I said these were small spaces, right? Like it was the offices. They weren't like it was their showroom. So only later were there bigger showrooms, but you know, this designer in particular it was in their offices. They all showed in 557th Avenue because all their offices were right on 7th and 40th Street. And I think Carolina was across the street. Carolina and Bill Blass were across the street. So, I mean, there would be the runway was like this big, and then they would turn a corner and they would run through a corridor of like offices. And then I would just stand in the doorway and just like make photos, and like you had a little flash, you had everything going, and it was just kind of fun. And then in between shows, you can just hang out and
while
make the
they're
photos
preparing.
there. Yeah.
And then process of developing those photos?
I mean, I just like dropped them off in the shopping mall.
Oh, really? You didn't do it yourself in the dark room?
Those were all color. I was only doing black and white, like back then.
And when did you switch to the color?
Well, I always shot color film. I just didn't process it because it's just much more difficult. Black and white is a little bit easier. Color is just like the chemistry is much different.
How did you learn that?
From that one class I took. And then I converted my laundry room into a dark room. That was kind of like a funny nightmare. You know, like sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, because you're like, oh, the basement, it's always the same temperature. But like you can never get the water the right temperature, and you know, the thermometer was
oh my God, I'm literally have this movie in my head imagining you doing all of that.
At 13,
At
14.
13.
Yeah, it was pretty funny.
So, and
Very
then,
fun.
so you were taking those pictures, selling them, making your own money. And so how did you decide, okay, I'm just going to do it for life now?
This is my profession.
Well, so it sort of chose me a little bit.
Yeah,
A
lot, I would say.
Yeah. You know, I got out of university, so I was shooting all through school. I had gotten set up with the yearbook in my university, and they gave me a darkroom, like a huge darkroom that was just mine. And I walked in, the first day I walked in, and there was a light safe, which is for printing paper so it doesn't get exposed to light. And on it, it said, desperately seeking Greg. I was like, well, you got to be kidding me, right? So I was just like, well, this must be the place for me. So I worked with them for like 3 years and throughout university. And then I lived in England for a little bit.
What did you learn in university?
It was like a quasi business degree. Like I wouldn't commit to one. I was just like, I'm just going to make up whatever I want to do, thinking I was really smart. And then, you know, like 20 years later, people are like, what did you major in? Like, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Yeah, so I got out of school with this quasi business degree, and I wanted to get into like fashion. I was still interested in the manufacturing, but you know, a lot of the people that I had known in these companies had sort of moved on. So it was a little difficult. And I was, you know, interviewing with a bunch of people, and then I met a nightlife photographer who was looking for photographers. So I lied to him and told him I liked his work. I hope he doesn't see this. And like I had an interview and they were like, you know your stuff. And I was like, sure, yeah. So they hired me the next day. And then the next day after that, I made a photograph that was published in New York Magazine. And then I was just like, oh, all right.
That was it. Was that a moment when you realized that you were successful as a photographer? Not as a quasi businessman?
Yeah. Yeah, it was cool. You know, you're like, I think you're only as successful as long as you're still working, kind of deal. So it's like you make a photograph and that's great. You know, if they buy another photograph or if they want you to work with them again, okay, then you're a success.
But when were you able to call yourself a photographer, not just a teenager who takes pictures?
I think I always was making photographs, so I think I was always sort of a photographer. Like when I got out of school and I told these fashion people that I knew that I wanted to get in on the business side, and they're like, you're a photographer. Like they just told me that. And I was just like,
accepted it.
I guess I am.
But that's fun. Were you aware how successful, like, I mean, how important it is and how big it is that the day after you were hired, your photographer skills wasn't really, like, you were not so experienced, but your photo is in New York Times?
It was New York Magazine.
New York Magazine,
and
sorry.
You know, photography is interesting because it's about a relationship, right? So whether, like, technically, the relationship between light and film, you know, like just speed and opening, like scientifically, f-stop and shutter speed, or the relationship between two people, right? So you're still, like, you can't have one without the other. So this photograph turned out to be like one person I knew, and then she was with like a really famous person, and they're like, well, if you know this person, then you kind of know me. And then we were just like, I mean, it was literally like two people sitting on a couch. It was a famous DJ and named Anita Sarko and Debbie Harry, Blondie.
Blondie.
That was my first photo. And it was like, in that time, it was like super cool. New York picked it up. It's for this little column in the front pages. And yeah, it was cool. I was just like, oh, all right.
You were credited?
It went to the photographer, the photographer who had the column.
Oh.
Yeah, it went to Patrick McMullen. He was the guy. So I worked with Patrick McMullen right out of school. And I loved it. It was pretty fun working with Patrick. And I didn't get credited for photos until, like, in all those columns until a couple of years later.
Oh, why?
And that was just like the deal. Because at that time, you know, there were also all the photographers that were shooting, they were kind of like directing. They weren't really making the photos. So it was very common practice for someone to be shooting something and not get credit. But everyone knew who was making the photos. So it wasn't until, it may have been after style.com that it had been before. I started doing something for Vanity Fair. Like I had a kind of traveling column in Vanity Fair through this guy, through Patrick. And that's when I first started getting credit. And it actually became Patrick and I's falling out a little bit. And then a few months later, I was working with style.com.
And I remember, as you mentioned, that the relationship was really important. I always felt like you were one of the very few photographers that I personally would just stop, do my thing, and get photographed with. Because in the chaos of the backstage and during fashion weeks, like models who did a lot, we just want to hide. Like, we don't want to do some extra work, you know. And you were one of the very little couple of photographers that I personally really enjoyed to work with. Somehow,
But
how
he
did
was
you-
hanging out with the girls back then. He wasn't really photographer. First, he would make connection like a friend, and then
I
we
mean,
accepted him.
He was with his camera.
Yeah, but
always.
he would make this connection with us not as a photographer, more as a friend. That's my memory. You know, he would be there for us, not just pose for me. How you doing? There was a first some kind of interaction, and then we just somehow accepted him as a friend, who is, by the way, backstage photographer. This is my memory of you. He would always make us laugh. He would say these silly things to make you laugh. Like, I think there was a little bit more effort in making connection with girls.
It's very important to have a relationship. I think for me, and look, everyone had pet names, right? Because there were a bunch of photographers and everyone was always shouting, and it was like, especially when the fashion happened, it was like people yelling all the time.
That's so true. Whenever, like, I heard Vlada, 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 and then whenever I hear Zaychik, I'm like, here I am.
That's me.
Yeah, because, you know,
That's so true.
look, there's so many girls, there's so many photographers, and look, everyone is someone, right? And you can't not see someone for who they are. And you have to appreciate that idea. Because if you want, we're not just shooting clothes, at least for me, you know, because it was always about the girls. And also the boys, you know, there was an advertising guy, he's like, you got to treat everyone the same. You know, in this business, treat everyone the same. The guys always had the worst time, but, you know, something like you guys were cast because certainly the way you look, but the way you held yourselves, right? Like, there was a reason that you were in the shows. You can ask any casting director, if they wanted anyone would be walking in the shows, but they need someone that will sell the clothes. Some editor told me, I'm trying to remember who it was, but they were like, whatever she wears, I'll buy it. And I was just like, wow, you know, like, that's impressive, because they weren't like they weren't a megastar. They were just like, they were just great models with like the right personality, and, you know,
Making the magic.
yeah. So when I came backstage, and it's, you know, those were like 9 or 10 shows we would do a day.
Yeah.
And the big girls did 5 or 6. Sometimes they did 7, and then had fittings. I would go to some of the fittings sometimes with some people, or I would, you know, even just be editing some of our film. But people were just tired. So if you like recognize that, and like you needed a friend, that was the most important thing. And at those moments of just like one utter chaos or confusion or joy or just like being extremely exhausted, there is like something raw that's there. And that's what I was looking for.
And you did it great.
Thank you.
Yeah,
really
definitely.
did.
I mean, the girls were posing for you, especially for you, because of
Yeah.
treatment they got from you.
Oh, thank you. But you guys turned it on. I have to say, like, you know, I would sort of lurk through like these makeup and hair tables and just look for that moment where everyone was just sort of just by themselves, and then I would get an eye. Then you would see me, and that's where I would make the photo. And I mean, I've seen girls cry, I've seen girls laugh, I've seen girls drink, I've seen girls like do everything. But the amazing thing is, as soon as you changed, then it was like whatever had happened like the day before or the show before, it just disappeared. So you guys just turned it on to another level. So then it was full arc.
Oh, wow. I never thought about that, actually.
That you're a different blogger when you
Yeah,
came?
that is so true.
So it was just like so much fun, because then you see the the character and the actress, or the character and the model. But the model was, always the same person. It was just like.
So you were always looking for that transition to that difference, right? That's why you come earlier and take pictures of the preparation and.
Yeah, well, I also did a lot of the beauty photography
Yeah.
for the Times. I did a little bit for Allure, and Style.com and Vogue later. You're looking for the magic, and there's so many moments. I did these, like a whole bunch of books with Colette, the store in Paris. I think we did like 4 books. Every season we would produce like this little tiny Backstage book.
Oh, wow.
I mean, we barely sold them, but like they sold. And there was so much stuff that was just so cool, and you couldn't believe it, because besides like hair and makeup done every hour is like wild, right? Even to this day, when someone tells me they want a gel manicure, I'm like, why? They're like, why are you, this guy, telling me I shouldn't get a gel manicure? I'm like, do you know how hard it is to get off? They're like, that's exactly right. I said, you have never walked 7 shows in a day. So it's pretty funny. But there's magic. There was so much magic. There was so much happening. So many talented people. So much. The hairdressers, the makeup artists, the models, the designers. Even the dressers. And girls would have like 3 looks, 2 or 3 looks. So there was like, and no one saw the clothes. No editor saw the clothes before you. So you had to figure out what was going to be great, or like hope the editor did not want the outfit you missed.
Yeah.
Because then they would just be like, okay.
So you were actually the one who was setting what's going to be in the magazines, what's going to be shown to the public.
I wouldn't say that.
If you didn't capture something, people would never see it, right?
Sure. And I think, designers either have a signature look that is going to be incredible, or, and like Carolini Trentini, or even like Carolina Kirkova, there's so many Ks, hold on. or you, it's just like some flowing dress. Like there was just a moment where you're just like, this print, this pattern, this cut, this fabric, like everything just like works, you remember going to Galliano Backstage and it was a dance party.
Yeah.
It was a straight on dance party. And it was like the Backstage 2000s Instagram right now is like throwing all those out there. And I remember being there and being the only photographer back there, because like John did not want that. And
how did it feel to be so privileged?
How do you get that privilege to be the only one?
I think I got lucky, like I knew the producers and I knew John and I knew
but there must be a backup
Steven.
for that. Even if I knew them, they wouldn't let me.
Yeah, they know what you're doing, so they're like.
So you had the talent that they.
Yeah, and the producers
Yeah.
know you're not interrupting the show. You're just adding value to the show, and people want the record.
You're too modest. But go on.
I don't know, sometimes I don't know. It used to be you were modest. You didn't talk about anything. So if you didn't talk about anything, it meant you were working. Now, if you don't talk about something, you're not working. So it's like, shit. I better start learning how to talk.
Yeah.
And then I don't like to talk all that much, which is kind of funny.
I feel you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Tell me
wild.
about that. Where do you keep all these photos from the Backstage? Tons of film first, now.
Yeah, the film. Well, Patrick has a lot of film up until. He has until 2003, and he did a book called Intense, Tents. And that's really nice to see. That was a really good book, and I have a whole bunch of images in there, so it's cool.
So it's a book we can find.
Oh yeah,
Can
I
we
think it
find
was
online?
like the publisher was Powerhouse. Patrick McMullen's name is on it. It's a great book though. It's really good.
We'll check it out.
It was all focused around New York Fashion Week, where the shows were in Bryant Park. Remember, there was like these tents. And
So there are your photos under his name.
yeah, yeah. So that was like for 5 years, and I have like all sorts of all these point and shoot cameras, and all those negatives are with me in my basement in like these plastic, like airtight, watertight,
So you keep them.
water safe, yeah,
Yeah.
negs. And then with style.com, those are all, that's when digital started.
Yeah.
So then those were archived. I have an archive, and then there's like one archive in Paris and another archive somewhere in the States.
So while you were taking pictures during Fashion Week, you had, like you mentioned, 9 shows a day, but it was a demand to publish them as soon as possible, right? How do you find that time? How was that for you to do it so quickly for style.com to have it?
It was important to be
immediately.
first.
Yeah, we had card runners. We had card runners and editors. So someone would meet you backstage
Get
and you
the
would
card.
give it to them, and then they would run to the studio, and then like an hour later the runner would come back
With the
and
empty card.
not with the empty card, or maybe it was empty if they took it, and then they would tell you, oh, there was a problem, or oh, there wasn't a problem, and you'd be like, what the fuck, like no, I can't. I mean, you slept like 3 hours a day, you know. I mean, I remember in Italy one year, you know, like the last show, the runner went home, editors went home, and you still had to deliver to someone. I remember coming home, having dinner, and in Italy, dinner's like 3 hours, right? Like you can't
Forever.
kind of like get out of it. And then you would have to edit, and you'd be falling asleep and waking up, and then like somehow got it out, slept for 2 hours. I mean, just like drank 9 or 10 coffees throughout the day. And in Italy, they were like in the crappy plastic cups, and you were like, what is going on? With like the worst, I mean, Mariacarla used to say the funniest stuff. I mean, she would come in the morning and just be like, what is this shit? What is this shit? Ah, come on, it's just, there's no coffee. How can there be no coffee? In this biscuit, all I eat is bread. All I eat is bread. And she's like not talking to anyone, because everyone's just like, she's just like putting it out there.
To the universe, yeah.
So maybe I'm going to say that again so we don't have to use her name, but you know,
That's funny, I think.
I think it's
Mariacarla
funny.
would
I think she'll
forgive
like
us.
it, yeah.
I think she'd be okay with it. But there was this one model that used to come backstage in Italy, and I mean, it was so funny. No one had slept. There'd be like these little coffee machines. There were waiters, right, with these giant espresso machines, and this model would come in and say, what is this? I can't believe, what is this shit? There's no coffee. It's 9 a.m. It's no coffee. I mean, it was like 6 a.m. actually. And be like, all I do is eat bread. Bread everywhere. Bread this, bread that. I can't even take and you're just like, oh, okay, we get it. You know, we're all there. We're all like.
So you see, that's they feed us with bread and we still stay in shape. So it's genes, I suppose, right? It's not some sort of.
He witnessed it, that we would eat crap and still be thin.
Well, listen, in Italy, the bread is different. The bread is magic in Italy. But yeah, somehow.
Especially 6 a.m.
So Greg, you said that you would have that card runner.
Yeah.
They would bring it. So you didn't edit always your work?
I didn't edit always, but you know, you would say if there was something that you really liked, or there was something, you would tell them, and it would come across. But you know, and we had good editors. When there's a good photo, there's a good photo. And generally those editors, they were taking like one of each look anyway.
Yeah. Did it ever happen that they lost it or didn't have something technical issue came up so your work
With the
disappeared?
card?
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think?
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I
What is
remember.
your biggest loss?
Well, I can tell you a funny story. First funny story is we were shooting film and had like the best shooting day. Everything was amazing. Like it was like New York magazines did a fashion recap every 6 months, and it was basically my film. And I had this great day, and I got a phone call the next morning being like, they were yelling at me, I think, and I was like, what the fuck? They're like, your camera is broken. And I go, what the hell? They're like, we just paid for like 20 rolls of film, which isn't even really that much, and we cannot use one image. And I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, there's something on your lens. And I'm like, I look at my camera because I'm already like working, and I'm like, there's nothing on my camera at all. And they're like, well, there's something. I go, send me a picture or send. So they send me the slide. I was shooting Chrome because Chrome processed really fast. Actually, you could get your Chromes in like an hour, 3 hours max. So I hold up this Chrome, and there's sure enough, this black thing. And I'm like, and I take off my lens and I lift up the mirror, and the shutter had sliced another shutter in half. Some fluke. I mean, so there's a curtain. The shutter is like a curtain. It like goes around, and when it opens, and you make enough photographs, those things get tired, and it sliced one, and like it shifted somehow, and it sliced it, and there was, sure enough, this little shutter just like dangling in front of the film. So the whole day was gone, and it was just like, oh man, that was such a good day.
Well, we had one good day of recording, and it didn't.
A couple
We
days.
feel your pain.
It's the worst feeling. It's the worst. And then when digital happened,
Did you still get paid for the day?
I got paid for the day.
Did you do the reshoot?
You can't reshoot. I'll tell you another a really funny story after. Like there's no reshoot. You can't bring back time. This was at a show, and all the shows there was a shutter in every frame. But like the digital stuff came out, and you like. The crazy thing about digital, it's like it's not real. It's not like a tangible thing. So if something is gone, it's gone. So you would have to get like these card MDs and like run some diagnostic that took like 45, 60 minutes to try and recover images, which was a nightmare. And then we would have like, because the technology wasn't that great, and you're shooting and reusing these cards over and over and over again, and the cards just got tired. So like the transfer wouldn't happen, or you would, it was just a nightmare. You just try and back things up, and Disc MD, oh man, those were the worst days. You're like, no, like I just shot Prada, and like Mucha was like stand next to me, which like never happened. You know, like people were like, you gotta stay away from Mucha, and like, you know, like you'd be friends with some of her friends, and they'd be like, oh, come on, let's go hang out with Mucha. I was like, no, I'm not allowed to. I mean, there was like weird psychological shit back there, because the production people wanted to keep their jobs, that no one, like everyone had to have an order. So even though we were supplying magazines, there were still like pecking orders all throughout the day, you know, or throughout the shows. That was like a whole other thing to navigate. I mean,
Yeah, but so many times they try to kick you out of the backstage.
Oh yeah.
Which is crazy.
Why would that? I never understood why. That's your
Yes.
job. I mean, you're credited. I've witnessed this a couple of times. The photographer, I'm credited. I have I'm allowed to,
Yeah.
but they're still kicking them out. So why?
Well, simply put, what press is important to the designer? So there were a few of us that had really good credentials.
Yeah, I think style.com was always there.
Always.
I was always allowed in because I had the greatest reach, really. I was
Yeah.
style.com, I was the New York Times, and I did Elle, I did a bunch of French magazines. So, okay, I had no problem because there were just so many people had eyeballs on those images, but I don't know, like some magazine from the Netherlands wants to be backstage at an American show. The American designer is just like, this is such a small market. There's so small little space. I need to maximize my space. So all the press people would be like, everyone get out. And then they would like choose you like it was like in high school or junior high school or elementary school and you're playing dodgeball, like I want that guy and that guy and that gal. I mean, there was one or two women back there.
Yeah.
And I mean, I couldn't imagine like being rejected is just like the worst thing. And then like all these photographers like, oh, but I'm shooting for, I don't want to say any of the magazines because like they now have, well, there's none really, but at some point, some of them had so many titles. If I'm blabbering too much, just cut me off. But there are so many layers of backstage, whether you're making the photo, which I'm happy to talk about, or the productions of the shows, or navigating the shows. I mean, you do 9 a day, and you have badges around your neck. You forget to take things off. There's like things happening, or you do like Marc Jacobs and you need 3 bracelets because I was doing Backstage Beauty, the first looks, and I was doing the front row.
Oh, wow.
So when all the girls, that's probably another reason why the girls liked me, because when the girls got changed in their first looks, I left. And I would talk to all the editors and all the celebrities and all the retailers, and I would walk and just shoot the entire front row, which took like 20 or 30 minutes because there's so many people. I spoke to everyone. I shook everyone's hand. I spoke to so many people every day. It was wild. And then the lights would dim and I would literally run down the runway and then pop right in. And it would be like Giselle was first, or TT was first, or like you were first, like you guys were like ready. And I'd be like, perfect, you too.
Yeah, right.
And then like start putting people together and shooting bags and like everything would just pop off. So you're just like, okay. It was just like, there was never a break, really.
And you were never that guy who would interrupt our intimacy, our privacy, like while we were changing. Like you had that respect, I remember.
Yeah, I mean, there's so little privacy,
Because back in the days, there was no privacy. Like we were changed literally like
There
with everyone. Now it's closed space. I mean, at least the shows I did lately.
Yeah. Well, the times are definitely different.
Is it less fun now?
It's different, like the designers are still cool. Like there's still a lot of people making really good clothing.
No, but I mean, a vibe.
The vibe, it's just different. It's fun, like you find your people, but social media, everything, everyone's shooting everything, everyone knows everything, or broadcasting live.
There's no mystery anymore.
No, there's no mystery.
Now, like everyone is taking backstage moment, so it doesn't feel like new or exclusive anymore.
It's certainly not exclusive. I think there was an article in System magazine years ago about like how great the exclusivity was, because then you like, there was this anticipation of like, you know, what's going on, what's happening. And now, and with every industry, like it's just out there. And people are so sensitive now. I mean, I certainly remember photographers getting thrown out for shooting, you know, women changing. That I definitely remember.
I was one of the reasons.
But it was just like, you know, it's like 15, 16-year-old gal. It's like you don't want to see that. Like, just find something else to do, you know? It's just, that's not that interesting. I think for the New York Times, one of my editors was doing a story about nudity backstage, I remember. I said, well, listen, let's pick a girl and then we'll just not stage it per se, but we'll have her getting ready for the first look. And we'll just have her do it, and I'll shoot the whole thing. And we told the producers, we told the press people, we told the models next to her and whoever was like behind her, that it was like, Greg's gonna be shooting me naked, basically. And it was a good piece. It was cool. But like...
But there was agreement.
Yeah.
That's different.
Yeah, you had to. It's just like... And like everyone's your friend or like your sister. And it's like, you know, you gotta love each other, especially that stuff. Like, even for us, you know, like, it was hard.
What was the hardest moment you remember?
You know, backstage hair and makeup was hard.
Why is that?
I mean, everyone's cranky. There's no space. People want to do this look. And I mean, I'm very lucky because I'm small. I think that helped.
That's a secret.
That helped. I am not a very big person, so I could easily slide in and out. And I also knew all the hair and all the makeup people, so I could like just kind of get in there, make a few photos and get out. But some of these other people were big. And if you knock into a makeup artist and they have a brush and it goes into the eye, like, you are not making friends.
Yeah.
So some of those moments were hard.
Do you have enemies?
Me, for sure. Sure, I have one or two people that don't like me.
Model side or hair and makeup side?
Probably on photography side.
Oh, photography. Okay.
Is it because you're one of the few that was never rejected?
Probably. And I was also very protective. So if there's some like weirdo going around back there or people who shouldn't be back there that would like photograph the flats or photograph the images and like send them off to China to get ripped off, because that happened.
No, really?
Yeah, people used to photograph the outfits, or when they got photographed on the runway or they got photographed backstage, you could see the detail, and then they would sell those photos.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's crazy shit happened back there. It wasn't just like models, hair, and makeup. It was like commerce.
Oh, wow.
It was like trade happening. Yeah, for real. And I'd be like, who the fuck is this guy? I was so like protected of everyone. Unnecessarily so, I think. I probably would have had more fun if I wasn't like super protective. But I definitely had a lot of fun just the same. But yeah, you would see weird people around. You'd be like, who the fuck is this guy? Who's this gal? What the hell? And tons of shit used to get stolen backstage. Like your bags got stolen.
No, thank God mine
No,
never was.
not me.
Actually,
Yeah.
I had a couple watches been stolen.
Really?
I mean, I thought I lost them, but probably they were stolen.
No. I mean, like,
I thought that I was just losing because there was, you know, I forgot something.
there's so many people, especially in Italy was the worst. France was pretty bad sometimes, but you know, like, you had to like watch your stuff. I would have a makeup artist that from every team, I'd be like, hey, can I put my stuff with your stuff?
Yeah.
And you'd be like, yeah, sure. No one messes with that because they're also always there.
Yeah.
So it was pretty cool. Like, it was very fortunate. I think I had one lens stolen once, and I was so angry.
Oof.
But whatever. I do have a great story of I went to a party after a show.
You went to a party. How did
You
you find
had-
time and
yeah.
energy?
I had to go.
Oh,
My
you
my
had to.
girlfriend at the time was designing for was like the assistant designer, and we went to a party after, and then we went home after, and in the morning I had to go to a job, and I was just like, "Where's my camera?" And I was just like, oh. I left it in the back of that taxi.
In New York?
In New York, and I spent all day, I had the receipt, and I spent all day like on the phone with like 311 or something like this, and they're like, dude, I don't know. And my phone rings, and I had one of my assistants bring me their camera, so I was shooting with their camera, and I get this phone call. It was like, Greg Kessler? I was like, yeah. Like, hold on a second. And I heard, hello? And I was like, hello? I have your camera.
Wow.
I was like, what? He goes, yeah, I got home, I opened up my trunk, and I said, this is not mine.
How lucky you are.
Yeah.
I couldn't
Such a
believe
nice
it.
guy.
That was crazy. And it was actually, it was the first night of Ramadan, and this was his good deed.
Ooh,
And I was
but
just
how
like,
did
wow.
he find you? Did you have a tag?
No, because he called.
Because I called, and
called.
they made a call, and somehow, like,
Mm.
I got the camera back.
No.
Couldn't believe it. That
And there was
amazing.
some material from your work.
No, they had all been sent away, so it's just like the camera.
Yeah, the camera
So,
itself.
But that's what
You need it,
Yeah.
right? To work.
What was in your bag always for the backstage shoot?
2 cameras, a couple of lenses, strobe, cards, batteries.
Did you ever have an assistant?
Yeah, I had an assistant later. The magazines, probably for some fault of my own, but I always just like operating on my own, because then I could talk, I could spend
Yeah.
time, it was just easier to maneuver. So for most of it, it was just me. And a lot of the light was like just handheld light,
Yeah.
you know, just,
Sometimes I would hold the light for a
Yeah.
photographer to shoot other girls.
yeah.
And Greg, were you before Fashion Week? Did you know your schedule in advance, or it just goes? Something pops up at last minute.
In the beginning, it was, you're basically on assignment for the magazines, and they have, well, they don't even know what they're going to see yet, right? So you would kind of just like go to all the big designers, and the magazines would put in for you. And then I started shooting the houses. So I would be shooting for the designers, or I'd be shooting for the sponsors, like the hair or makeup team. And then that dictated where you were going to go. So once that happened, then it was like you couldn't do Proenza because you had to be earlier at Altazara or something like that. So that's how the schedule sort of dictated. You either went to the designers that you thought were going to be great shows, or someone told you like, hey, you got to go to this show. And you'd be like, cool. And it'd be at, of course, like 9 o'clock at night. You'd be like,
Was it worse to be at night or early in the morning?
I think you were just so tired at the end of the night
Numb.
that it was just like, it was kind of painful.
Really, I felt like I was always more energetic by night, because in the morning I just couldn't open my eyes.
Oh, totally. That is for sure. And also, you know, the night before, you know, after the last show, you'd all go out, right? Like most of the models went to fittings,
Yeah,
but like
that was our out.
photographers and editors, like you would go to a party. There was always a party. So you'd go to the party and check it out. So the mornings were definitely difficult, but by the end of the day, you were just so tired. So yeah, I never really looked forward to the last show. but a 6 a.m. call time was just the worst. Like the row was like 6 a.m.
So after Paris Fashion Week, after the last show, what did you do?
Sleep for 18 hours.
In Paris? Or you fly back to New York?
So I would stay in Paris for a little bit afterwards. I mean, I've been shooting for so long, you know, so it was always a little different. Depending on what work was happening and where, you would definitely sleep the next day and then fly out the following day. And that was that. But I remember, I guess I flew back the next day once, got home, went to bed, and just woke up and had no idea where I was. I mean, you know that, right? Like
so many times.
Whenever you're traveling and you're just like,
few minutes.
Did you ever had that, like, you sleep, before you open your eyes, but you're awake already, and you're like, where am I right now? Like, I literally didn't know where I am in the world. And then I'm like, opening my eyes, I'm like, okay, what's the room? It's not familiar. I'm in Paris.
yeah.
Yeah, I had a moment in Japan when I woke up in the middle of the night. There was no, back then, European SIM card was not working in Japan, so you have to have a Japanese phone. I landed, I didn't get my phone, anything. I just went straight to the apartment. I slept 27 hours. I woke up middle of the night. I don't know where I am. What time is it? Is it Sunday, Monday? I know Monday I have to work. Did I wake up or I did not wake up? Like nothing. I walked out. I remember Omotesando. And I see these stores, and Dior and this, and I know the place, but I don't know what is the place.
No.
Around 4 or 5 hours, I couldn't place myself anywhere. I couldn't call anyone. I don't know what time. I mean, it's dark outside. Who do you call?
Well, if you're in Russia, it could be dark.
Yeah,
it could be
right.
dark in the middle of the day. It could be
But
night.
I knew that I was in Japan after a little bit because I start realizing that the symbols are there. But in Omotesando, everything is like Dior. Right? Oh my God,
funny.
that was a weird feeling. What do you do after the season, between the seasons?
Well, I'm shooting for events, some marketing things, some e-com, especially, I mean, now it's all about e-com. So like bits and pieces like that, doing some editorial. I have a piece for 10 coming out next week, I think. And then I shot a special project for a designer that comes out the following week. So there's always like something happening.
Can you tell us the design?
Yeah, it's for Mugler. Yeah, so Mugler has a charity arm that they sponsor the arts. So we did an arts project with their with one of these groups that they were sponsoring. So it was really beautiful, and you're working with these young people who are super passionate about their arts, and we're photographing. It was all dance, so we're photographing these dance pieces. It was like really into it. Like if you have ever saw the movie Black Swan, very much like that. So both modern and classical. We shot in 2 different cities. The photos came out really well, and there's a film that's attached to it. So yeah, it's cool.
So you were photographing the actual
event.
I was shooting the dancers.
The dancers.
Yeah.
Not behind the scenes.
No, this is like the actual dancers doing their choreography.
That's hard.
It's amazing. I love it. It's like true motion. So it's like...
But it's hard to shoot, no?
Not for me. I mean, I love it. So, I mean, you guys have a bunch of questions that you sent me, and some of them were really cool. And I want to get to all of them. I don't want to just sort of like kind of wax on, because I can just like be somewhere else in my head for sure.
Which one was your favorite?
Well, lending to this sort of like how difficult it is for dance, like how difficult is it to shoot a show? I mean,
when everything is...
The show is
chaotic.
10 minutes long. There's 45 looks. like do the math. I'm not going to do the math. You can do the math.
Or you guys.
You do, and write down in the comments
Um,
so he knows for next time.
it's crazy,
crazy, yeah.
Now it's definitely much faster. There used to be like longer, like Dree's shows were like longer and more beautiful, and you could like set things up and make it happen. But like Galliano or McQueen, with like some of these big things happening, you couldn't move around all that much. Things were happening fast. So you have hair and makeup for 2 or 3 hours. Then there's dressing and then the show, and that's like 30 minutes, like max. And if you're shooting the front row, then there's like a whole bunch of other stuff happening. And if girls, if girls change and you miss those first looks, you're just like, you can't go back in time. So, the arcs of those shows, it's like a sporting event. But the thing about sporting events is actually time does stop in a football game or a hockey game or American football or, football. There are these peak moments. Basketball, there are these peak moments. And you kind of, like, fashion is sort of like a sport. And there are these peaks. And there is some stoppage. There is a moment that is going to happen after seeing it enough times. Like if a girl's getting changed, there's like the zipping of it, right? So like the back is open and there's 4 hands and there's like, and she's like, that's going to happen. So with enough practice, you kind of just like get into it. There was one very famous photographer who was shooting Backstage for a magazine. He definitely did New York. I don't remember if he did any other seasons. And we were friends. He was much older, like my father's age. But we had a great relationship. And he goes, "How do you do this?" He just looked at me like, I think he was shooting, it could have been Giselle, it could have been Julia Stegner. It was like a big model at the time, and she was standing there and he was like lining her up, and then the producer grabbed her and he was like and like the model was just like, "Sorry, dude, like I gotta go." And he's like you don't have that time. No. You have 1 second. Yeah. And then when there's all those other photographers happening, that's where the pet names really came in great, because it was just like Zaychik.
Zaychik is here.
How many Zaychiks do you have?
One. There's one. There's
one and only.
One and only.
No, that is really true, because you hear your name from so many angles, with whatever, like just capture, and then you hear this Zaychik and you know exactly what to look. It was really, really helpful.
Yeah, I had a lot of nicknames.
How many? Can you tell us some?
Name the girl.
Gemma.
Well, Gemma was Gems.
Yeah.
Sasha.
Koshka.
No.
Yes, she is Koshka, yes.
Yeah.
That's a cat, by the way,
Yeah.
the female.
Kasia.
Struce.
Greg, and so how did you do it? Since your photographer friend asked you, how did you prepare for those moments?
Wait, hold on 1 second. Struce and Hannah Gabby, they were very close. We all spent a lot of time together, but it was they were sounds, because they were like birds. Woo, woo. They were like things like that were happening. Woo, woo.
And they know.
Woo, and like the head would peek up.
Like the whole.
And you would look. It was just like.
But that's the connection that I was talking about.
Yes,
that's the connection that you had with the girls, and that's why you can see even in your photographs that there is something extra. It's not just the moment, it's not just the girl, bag, light, or whatever. There is something extra, and that's the connection he makes with girls. Best backstage moment that never ever was published or talked about?
Oh, there's a really good one, actually.
Tell us.
There's this model. It was her birthday, and we all went out. I don't know if we all, well, there was a group of us.
Where?
We all went out. It was in New York. It was it was so much fun. And I remember saying, like, Oscar in the morning? And they're, yeah.
That was the end of the party.
I'll see you there. I mean, it's like 3 o'clock in the morning, And
6 a.m. call time.
Whatever the call time was, I was there. She was not there. And this was such, people were like calling, I don't know, people were looking at me, I was like, like, what are you looking at me for? I'm not her. And she strolls in, everyone is in lineup, everyone is dressed. She walks in.
She made it.
Everyone was in lineup. She sits down, Orlando starts doing the hair, and then Oscar, brings her a birthday cake.
Aww.
Because they got a birthday cake for her. And it was like the sweetest moment.
Oh.
She must have felt so bad.
Yeah.
Because we had to hold up the whole freaking show for her, and she was the first look. Could you imagine? And
did she walk the show next season?
yeah.
Of course, Oscar gave her a cake.
Yeah,
She must have.
yeah.
I mean, that was, I will never say who that was, but it was just like, oh man, that was the worst. I felt so bad. Worst moment for me?
Did you feel some responsibility for that?
No, not at all. Worst moment for me was a similar moment like that. And I was shooting for someone, and I had to call my assistant, and I just said, you're me. I just can't make it.
You switched the roles?
Yeah, I mean,
You did not show up at all?
I didn't go. I think maybe I went, but like, I just like dragged myself out, but I missed the call time. I missed the call time.
For the shooting or for the backstage moment?
Backstage.
For the backstage. This is all backstage stuff.
Yeah.
Wow. Some party. Do you remember the party that made you
Yeah.
miss
Was it
that?
worth
Yeah.
it?
Was it worth it?
It's never worth it.
No.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun, but like, you got to do the job. So, like, you're here to work, you
It
can't.
happens to the best.
Yeah.
Greg, was it? Were your editors telling you which girl particularly they would like you to focus on most of the time, or they just give you
Like
freedom?
you just.
It depends. So like we did this piece, this nudity piece we did Jessica Stam, because she was a big girl, and people would want to know, like, how are you affected, because you're a recognized person. So they wanted her, but the editors in particular, they're not asking for people really, but there are definitely people that they want, because they know it will sell. Like, they know.
Do
it
they
will
tell
move.
you who's that?
Unless it's a
beforehand?
particular piece that they know someone's wearing, or they're doing a story on them, I think they more or less assume you're going to get the shot of the people that are the most important. So rarely do they give you that direction, especially because we're seeing everything before they are.
And again, they trust you, right?
Yeah. I mean, they assume. That was actually the worst thing, is that they assume you're going to get it.
Yeah.
When you're just like, couldn't have told me. You couldn't have just told me.
Is it easier when someone tells you and directs you?
Yeah, it's good to have direction. I mean, it's always great to work on a story, because then you know. Some of the magazines would send, after, they would send trends that they saw that they're looking for, and then someone would put together a package, either the editor or me, be like, oh yeah, I saw that here, I saw that there, and then you would send them these packages.
And Greg, were you ever able to predict the new face to become successful model in the business when you saw them backstage?
There are always a few that shine a little brighter. I don't want to say any names in particular, but some of them went on to like really good contracts, and you just knew. Like when you were with the
Before they
casting
went.
director, yeah, you were just like who was that? Or like
Tell us the example. Who was one?
one.
Or three?
One was Sigrid Angren.
Mm-hmm.
I met her, one of her first casting calls with John Pfeiffer. I was doing a video for the New York Times called Casting Call.
At the casting.
At the castings. I did like a series of videos for the New York Times. One was a casting call, one was following a model. One was with the casting director, one was with the model, and we did some other things. Anyhow, but I remember saying to John, I was just like, wow. Like, she's from Martinique, and which was also like a story, but she was so, like, had this innocent beauty face, you know? And so that was one of them. I think, who was another good one? Felice, the Dutch model. I met her at Altazara in France, and I just went to the casting director. I was like, who is this person? And they were just like, she's gonna be big, right? I was like, yeah. There was someone else I remember. I remember meeting Kendall Jenner. She walked like Givenchy. It was her first show, and they like introduced me. But there was someone else. That was cool. Those two really stand out, though. I think Maria Borges was also one of them. Carly was one of them. But she was just like, her energy is just like she's like special. Oh, Natalia Vodenova was amazing. And she had a great season, and then she was missing. She was gone. And I ran into her on the street at a restaurant, and I was just like, Nat, like, we missed you. Where were you? And she stood up, and she was pregnant. And I was just like, get out of here. Really? And she's like, yeah. And she was, you know, but like from her first season, you were just like, it was one of those faces.
Did she have a pet name?
Nat? No, I think it was Natalia. I don't.
She started the Russian era. So there was not so many Natalias.
There was Polly, Natasha Polly.
I think she came after.
Hello.
Probably.
After
Whatever.
all these years, do you have favorite model to shoot backstage?
Everyone shines their own way, you know, like, you know, it was amazing when I saw you at Sergio Hudson, right? Sergio Hudson is like one of those super nice designers. He's very underappreciated, and he's a sweetheart of a guy too. And he has customers, so it's, but anyhow, seeing you at that show was super nice.
Thank you. Likewise, Greg.
And great pictures from that show.
What advice would you give to aspiring photographers looking to break?
Wow.
Do you think it's easier now to break in or not?
It's definitely easier now. Well, maybe it's harder because there's no magazines, but, you know, there were so many photographers at one point because the barrier to entry was a cheap camera, right? Like, there were so many people that had cheap cameras, but like, it didn't matter. I don't know why, but now everyone has these cameras that are so much better than everyone. They're all doing video. They all have outlets. But there's not really that much backstage happening anymore. Like I did a few shows for New York, and
You're not going around anymore.
You mean not
No.
much backstage happening, like clients not inviting to shoot a backstage, or the magazines are not interested? What is that about?
you know, breaking into backstage or starting off in backstage now, I think it's a little bit easier because there are so many outlets, and like people can have 15,000 viewers, someone can have 1 million viewers. Like those numbers, like people pay attention to those numbers. And I think designers know. They definitely know. When they invite people to their shows, they know the reach of that all these people have. So, you know, there's no magazines per se, but, you know, one of the things I used to say was, hey, Vlada, can I make your photo for Instagram magazine? It's today's issue or something like that, right? Which is like a stupid joke. But,
It became.
you know, it's just like all of a sudden,
It's happening.
Instagram is everywhere, and like all these videos are everywhere, and they just get eyeballs. I had one client that said, every time we put this model in this outfit or for the show, that look sells in the store. So we make sure that like it's coordinated. So I think it's almost easier to get into the shows now.
If you have followers. What if you don't?
I think
where
you
do
can
we get them?
figure it out. You figure it out. If you really want to do that, you figure it out. You know, you call up hair and makeup people. People do things for so little money now that like that part of the business has sort of disappeared a little bit, but you see the difference in the quality, right?
Yes, you do.
So depends on what you want. Like I do these beauty clients and I love working with them and I love doing the beauty light, and the photos look great and they're usually happy. But if you have someone that doesn't know light or doesn't know something, it doesn't really work.
And Greg, you also, between backstage of fashion weeks, you also work with celebrities, right?
Yeah, every now and then we do some personalities, yeah.
Yeah, like recently I saw you were capturing Demi Moore.
Oh yeah, I
Met
did
Gala.
Demi. I had a really interesting run with her because I was working with Dolce & Gabbana. I've been working with them for like 10 years.
With Dolce & Gabbana?
With Dolce, yeah.
Love them.
Yeah, they're great. And you did a bunch of stuff with them, like Steven, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And like Demi came, and I know her stylist since his first day, like literally. And I was talking to her and I get this tap on the shoulder and I was like, wait, what? And of course, and then I'm like with Demi, I'm like, how long has he been styling? Brad Goreski, how long have you been working together? She's like 7 years.
wow.
Great.
So connections again.
Yeah, so then, so I did a bunch of photos of her there in Italy, and then a few weeks later I shot her for Cartier, which was super nice, yeah.
What would you say to younger Greg, 13 years old Greg?
And there's so many things I would say.
Say it all.
I mean, I had so much fun. I really did. I would just say, have a little less fun.
A little
And,
less? You mean in
I
between?
had so much fun. I mean, it
But
was
that's a
so
cool
much
thing.
fun. Let's start again.
We're gonna keep this part.
It was so much fun. I would not trade any of it for anything. But I think
Maybe
you know
they
what,
can
actually?
call maybe that can fall into the question, do you
Regrets.
have any regrets?
You know, at one point, I was shooting a lot. My only regret, or the thing that I would say, what I would say to the younger self, 13-year-old Greg, or like
Pick.
Let's do 13.
13-year-old Greg, I would say, check your exposure. I had so many dark images, like when
But that's how you learn.
yeah.
Like me, check your microphones, Ines.
Yeah.
And let's
No, I have him there, yeah.
I like to hide. Oop, there it is. So to 13-year-old Greg, I would say check your exposure. And, you know, you learn how to set up the image, you know, like you learn. It's all going to come, just like be patient. That is a big thing I would always say is be patient. Never force anything because it's going to happen.
And that's hard.
Yeah. But you get so excited and you want to leave sometimes. You have to do all these other things. And to that, I would say to my younger self, when I first started like shooting professionally, I guess, I would say slow down and don't try and shoot too much.
Okay.
Because at some point I was like, I remember I was shooting for a designer and both the hair and the makeup were my clients. So I had 3 clients, I had 5 photographers, and it was just a nightmare.
Did you feel like you burned out?
Oh yeah. I
At the
definitely
beginning.
burned out.
How did you recover?
Well, you know, from the beauty thing, like that incident in particular, it was like, you have to choose the client. Because I worked for a hair client with a very demanding lead for a season, but I was also shooting for the Times and I was also shooting for someone else, and they did not like that. They're like, we're paying you, we want you. And I'm just like...
So you mean they want you to be always available or to be exclusive just so no one else have you?
Pretty much exclusive.
Would they pay for the exclusive?
Well, they didn't really want to pay. Like, you had a number and the number was good, but it was like, you know, New York Times is the biggest newspaper in the world, at least at that time. And, you know, they wanted their thing. Like, you know, you're just working with them and that's just the way it is. So, but the clients, like, you know, client is a client, but a magazine is a client, a beauty brand is a client. So I would just say to my younger self then, do less, concentrate more, build those relationships. I mean, I had an assistant that stole a makeup client from me. And I was so pissed off. And sure, that happens, but it was real dirty. And I was just like...
That's low kick.
Yeah. And then, I was so angry. Anyhow, I laugh at it now, but I think he was smart and just said, I will like be dedicated to you. I will be married to you. I will do anything you want.
There you go.
Yeah.
Where do you see yourself 10, 15 years from now?
15 years from now, I would love to be still shooting for sure. Definitely working more beauty. I love beauty. I love it. So certainly doing more beauty and more fashion and personality stuff. I'll just continue on what I'm doing, but not take all that extra time for granted, because you know, you do the month of shows as a photographer, and then I took for granted all the resale and the money that I had made and didn't push hard enough to continue doing what I was doing in the off season. And that was tough. So you would kind of miss out on jobs just because I was like, I'm doing good enough. I don't need to push too hard. But the truth is, in everything, you really always need to push and keep going and keep going and keep going.
Momentum.
Yeah.
So you would push a little more.
I would push harder. That's what I would say to my younger self. Don't do too much, but always push. Don't take on too much at one time, that it's too difficult to manage. Have your basket balanced and keep it full.
Yeah, amazing. We wish you that.
Yeah. And Greg, how would you describe your future in 3 words? The wish for the future.
Balanced.
No, I don't know. I want to come up with 3 words that sum up my future. 3 words that, what was it? That's a hard question.
That how you see your future, manifesting your future.
The future is bright. So that's 4 words, but the future is bright.
No, but I mean in adjectives or this, that, and that, and that.
Bright, beauty. You can use beauty.
I think you want to be inspired.
Trying to inspire him.
I think inspired is a good one. You want to continuously be inspired, continuously be fulfilled, and always be happy.
Inspiration, fulfillment, and happiness.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
There you
She
go.
got it. You made it.
You gotta draw it out.
We'll wish you all of that.
You gotta stretch
Yeah, we
the
wish
dough.
you all of that.
You gotta work the dough.
So the game time.
Pardon?
The game time. We have a
Explain,
game for
Lana.
Ah, okay, yeah.
Have a little game.
All right.
I would love to talk longer and more and get more details, but time is ticking. So we have this game, this or that. You just have to pick one without thinking much, not without thinking at all.
Yeah.
Quick.
We'll do it quick.
Yeah, there is a name for the game. We still don't know the name. We cannot remember the name.
This or that.
This or
I
that.
call it this or that.
Yeah.
Okay, milkshake or smoothie?
Milkshake.
Movies or books?
Movies.
Morning or night fashion shows?
Oh, I think I said the morning.
You can change it now. Adventure travel or relaxing vacation?
That's tough. I love an adventure, but I think I really need a relaxing vacation.
Fashion week in Paris or fashion week in Milan?
Oh, Paris.
Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Flash or natural light?
Oh, that's tough. I don't know if I can answer that. I can't answer that.
What was first came to your mind?
Well, I just shot something today, and we started with natural light, and we got exactly what we wanted. And then we switched it up and did some flash, and got exactly what we wanted. So,
Both.
it's both.
Okay, that's an
I
exception.
don't prefer
That's exception.
one over the other. Yeah,
Winter or summer?
summer.
Cooking at home or dining out? One. First.
No, there is none. I cook at home. I love cooking. I really, really, really love cooking. But, I work with a lot of chefs as well, so I love going out. But I think ultimately cooking at home.
Bags or shoes?
What, for male or female?
It doesn't matter. Just first.
Oof. Shoes.
He's so tired. We dragged all his energy.
No, I mean, for a man, I love shoes, actually. I actually have a really cool pair of shoes. And I remember talking to Andre Leontali, and he's like, oh, I love your shoes. I was like, thanks, I got them in Italy. He's like, oh, who makes those? I go, they're Etro. I go, it's fabric. He goes, oh, this is tapestry? That's what he said to me. And I was like, yeah. He's like, he couldn't believe that, and I love Etro, but that we had design sense. Because there were a lot of like people that thought that photographers were just like these
American photographers.
American.
It's extra.
The English ones were the best dressed, with the exception of one English person who was the worst dressed. But I think we evolved over the years. I always had good taste, I think, but when you're
Well,
working,
you grew up in a fashion environment, and that was your interest.
yeah.
So.
But I love that story with Andre when he was, and I know Andre since I'm 15.
Oh, wow.
So that was, I have photos of Andre, like really old
We need
photos of
them.
Andre.
Yeah.
Those
One more
are
episode
kinda
with
fun.
us, with the shoes and.
Okay, let's continue the
Yeah.
game. Train or flight?
I'll fly.
Instant upload or time to edit?
Instant upload.
Big name supermodels or rising stars?
Oh. The rising stars. Oh,
Rising stars.
I
it
say
is.
rising stars. Yeah,
You
Awesome.
yeah.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you so much.
My
This was
pleasure. Thank
amazing.
you. That was fun.
Yeah, that was a great talk. Thank you
Yeah,
so
I
much.
think we just scratched
Yeah.
like the surface of the story that is there that you have.
Thank you so much for sharing. It all with
My
us.
pleasure. Actually, you know what? I have one thing. There was one show, and your question, one show, like my favorite show.
Yeah.
There are definitely like, I look forward to certain designers, but there was one show in particular I was told that I couldn't be backstage for.
Why?
Greg backstage couldn't be backstage.
I couldn't be backstage. It was an Alexander McQueen show, and sometimes you were good backstage and sometimes you weren't. Sometimes it was only American Vogue print. That was it. Which, you know, it happened, it was annoying, and you'd be like, but like you have to like peacock. And the press said to me, Greg, trust me. So I was like, sure, okay. And I went out and I actually sat next to the designer's best friend, I think. It was the designer's best friend, Jefferson Hack, and me. And it was the Alexander McQueen show with the Kate Moss hologram. That was insane. That was so cool. I mean,
Wait, and you were
I
sitting
was
watching
I was
that show.
watching the whole
So
thing.
it was the blessing in disguise, right?
Yeah, they're like, Greg, sit. I was like, I'm gonna leave. Like, I don't need to stay here. They're like, Greg, sit.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
You're one lucky guy.
Yeah. All those McQueen shows were cool. The chess game, the dancing one. They shoot horses, don't they?
Very
At the
innovative.
Cirque d'Hiver. You were there. Whoa, those were
Yeah.
crazy. Actually, that is really cool. There was one show, Cirque d'Hiver, it was the dancing one. No, it was the chess one. And there was a dress made of fresh flowers.
Tanya, I think, was wearing it.
I think so. And Lee came and they were like, production said, everyone hide. And you're like, this bullshit, you know? But you're like, sure, okay. Just don't be seen, because like this thing is really difficult. They've been working on it. He comes, does his thing, and I'm just like by this pillar. And just kind of take it in. I think I stole a few snaps. And then we went out, we did rehearsal. We watched the rehearsal, which was sick. It was amazing. And then 10 or 15 years later, they had the retrospect in the Met, and the exact dress was there, and all the flowers are dead. And it's so cool. It was so cool.
Really?
Yeah. That dress only existed on the runway. I never saw it ever again until 10 years later at the Met.
Were they like dried?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Preserved.
It was so cool. You're just like, oh,
my God,
wow.
I missed it.
So
Yeah.
we need one more episode.
Wait, you know what? I also wanted to say that I remember when we did the beginning, right? When Style.com was in, that was the only source to see the pictures.
Mm-hmm.
And you remember how every morning, like, you would wake up after the show like,
check.
to see how it looked because we didn't know. And so basically, how was it for you to know that you're photographing for such influential thing, and you're the one?
It was cool. It was cool. You know how many like mothers and families like came up to me and said, because of you, we know where our kids are.
Exactly. Yeah.
It was like,
Yeah.
I never really thought of it like that. Like, it was awesome. I would look at the photos and I'd be like, why did the editor choose that? Why did they do this? I was more critical. But I never thought of it as that. It was just an outlet, you know. It was just great. It was cool. I was very fortunate to have the opportunity. And when it became available, like I heard that like they were looking for Backstage people, I put together a reel. Like, I still have it somewhere. I got this film editor. I was just like, dude, I got to get this job. Like, if there's some person that's going to do this, it's going to be me.
Yeah.
And
So-
it was you.
So
Yeah.
you were taking pictures and didn't know that you were making history, I guess.
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think anyone's
But
ever making
influencer,
history.
you were like influencer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're showing the world what, you know, one part of the world is doing. So the internet is cool like that. You know, it brings everyone together. Now, of course, it kind of pushes people apart. But, you know, the cool thing about Style.com was there were only so many outlets so that you could see this kind of stuff. So back in the day, in the States, there were like 5 or 6 TV shows, right? Like cable TV certainly existed, but everyone watched, I don't know, like, I don't want to date myself, but you know, everyone would watch one show and the next day everyone would talk about it.
Yeah.
Same as the news events. Everyone would watch like the news and you either talk, like everyone watched the same thing. So Style.com was like that.
Yeah.
Everyone saw Style.com.
First
so
stop in the morning.
everyone could talk about the same thing. So it had really brought a lot of people together, at least for like that first hit of news that was visual, more visual than all the newspapers because they had limited space. Style.com didn't really have limited space. You know, I mean, I always wanted more photos up there, but you know, it was great to have that opportunity. It was really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll close with that.
Cool.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
thank you,
thank
Greg.
you.
Thank you for watching.
Fashion Host Podcast.